You're listening to another episode of Rig Recon Live. I'm Bruce Quick alongside Jason Whitmire, and today we're joined by Danny Graham of Kussmaul. But before we get to that, make sure you follow us on social media at Rig Recon. You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch it on YouTube. And then most importantly, make sure you visit our website, rigrecon.com, for all the latest apparatus content. So today we're excited, Jason. We're joined by Director of Sales for Kussmaul, Danny Graham. And he's talk about Kussmaul and here to talk about some of the great things that they're doing in the fire industry. Danny, thank you for joining us today. And if you want to start out and just sort of give a little introduction of how you got here and how long you've been in this industry.
Yeah, sure. So my career began in 1996 with On Spot Tire Chain. I started then, Pat Fry hired me there. We looked through the company and I became a regional sales manager there, taking care of 19 states through various other industries besides fire and emergency with On Spot. I was there for 20 years and then I moved over to Kussmaul Electronics. Colin hired me over. I was RSM for a couple of years and now I'm the director of sales. Dealt with very, very many of the OEMs and dealers across the country for the fire and emergency industry. I take care of the 4 regional sales guys that Kussmaul has. Been a great job. Great job dealing with this industry.
Danny, I think anyone that's driven a fire truck knows that when they hop in the truck, they start it up and bang, they hear a pop noise and a plug ejects out the side of it. So Kussmaul is probably 99% of those trucks have Kussmaul auto ejects, and people know Kussmaul from that standpoint. But tell us a little bit more about what else Kussmaul does, because I know your company, I know you do a lot more than just battery charging.
Yeah. So in 1967, Ernie Kussmaul founded and started the company of Kussmaul Electronics. Ernie had a passion for the fire industry and wanted to make sure that we provided products to keep trucks on the road, be able to get in the truck, start the truck, the batteries weren't down, the air brakes were up, and everything was ready on that truck so they could drive out of the station and go tend to the fire and help save lives. So Ernie was real passionate about building those products. And still today, that's what we do. We do battery chargers. We do auto ejects, which everybody sees on the side of the trucks. We do USB connectors. We do load managers. We do solar panels. We do, with our sister company, Zero RPM, we do idle mitigation systems. So we're involved in lots of different things, along with our other sister companies, Antrax, with the inverter chargers and stuff for ambulances and things like that. So we cater to specific fire and emergency markets. It's, other folks buy some of our stuff and put them in other vehicles, but our stuff is mostly made for the fire and emergency.
Yeah, Danny, before we started recording, you brought up a great point as we were going through questions, right? You were talking about the difference between IRS and IMS, and I think you brought up some great points there. So can you explain that for everyone who's listening?
Sure. So our sister company, Zero RPM, as my regional guys and I, we help manage that system through our OEMs and our dealers across the country. Right now, we have a few fire OEMs that are installing the Zero RPM idle mitigation system, or IMS. There are several others out there that other manufacturers and things have made of their own. A lot of them call that IRS, which is idle reduction system. Idle reduction and idle mitigation are very close to the same thing, where it's just reducing emissions and reducing the need for idling in a truck. And so the Zero RPM system that we use, just similar to the others, it takes over everything on the truck. If you come to a call, you're in your ambulance or your fire truck, and when you put the vehicle in park, the idle mitigation system takes over everything on the truck, shuts the vehicle off. It powers all your lighting equipment, your handhelds that are being charged, your radios, all that kind of stuff while you're on scene. The only thing that does not power is the pump. So if you need to pump water, it would automatically shut the system off and start the truck so you could pump water if needed. During that time, everything is running off of the lithium-ion batteries that we provide and put in the system, including air conditioning, heat. We add both of those things to our system as well. Once you are back in the truck and you're ready to leave the scene, the driver will just push on the brake of the vehicle. The vehicle automatically start back up. We can drive off, drive back to the station. Well, while it's at scene and in idling, if the state of charge of the batteries gets to a certain set point that you set it at, usually 20%, the vehicle will start automatically and recharge the batteries via the alternator. So it does several things. Well, idling is one of the worst things you can do for a vehicle or a motor. They're made to be driven. So idling a motor does damage to a motor more than anything. So you cut out the idling. When you cut out the idling, you cut out the emissions that are coming out of the vehicle. You cut out the noise. If you have a command scene sitting behind a fire truck or something like that, you have less noise of the trucks running and stuff like that. So everyone can concentrate more on what things are going on. Better air to breathe, less noise, it's safer. You also have the air conditioning on the inside. And everybody knows a fire scene, right? It's hot. They need relief from that. So the cab of the truck can be kept at a certain temperature the whole time with the air conditioning, so they can get in and relieve themselves from that. So it's a safety also as far as you can.
Danny, I think a lot of people know they've got newer cars, and they know exactly what you're talking about with a newer car, where they come to a stoplight and they stop for a certain amount of time, the car shuts off, and then it starts again. And I think one of the points you hit on here is, with that car, it's all about saving gas. I mean, sure, it's about emissions too, but it's mostly about the efficiency of the vehicle and saving gas. With the diesel engine, it's different. And that's what I think you're just starting to hit on there is, it's not so much, sure, it's a lot about emissions, but it's not so much about saving diesel fuel. It's more about the damage you're doing to that engine when it just sits at idle, because with the new exhausts, we need to be heated up and we need to burn off things like that DPF filter. And when you're sitting at idle, you're not doing that, correct?
Correct. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the difference between the idle mitigation, how it works, versus the cars that shut off when you come to a stop, is this truck, the vehicle's zero RPM system works when the vehicle is off. It doesn't, not while you're driving and when it's in park. Right. It works when it's in park, not in drive. So the technology is made to be in the same realm as far as what they want it to do. But the idle mitigation system is while the truck is in park, and the other is while the vehicles are being driven.
I know as you guys entered this market, there were a lot of studies done on things. Is there a number? I know from experience that we've talked about this in other podcasts. Everyone wants to talk about, what does a fire truck do? Oh, it gets on scene, it pumps, it puts out fires. Yeah, very rarely. That is the most important thing it does, not what it does most of its life. Is there a rough estimate of how often a vehicle like this sits at idle, not pumping?
Well, so we do a calculator. So when we're figuring out what system to put on the truck, we do a calculator. We figure out how long the load draws that are on the truck, whether it's the air conditioning, the all items and things that they want to power while they're sitting on scene. Because like you said, on scene, they may just be sitting in the middle of the road blocking traffic for an accident. They might be there for an hour. They might be there for 2 hours. It might be there for 20 minutes. But that whole time, the system can shut the truck off and no emissions or anything, but all the lights are still on, protecting the crew while they're working. But as far as the amount of gas and fuel savings, we do this calculator that we put in all the parameters of what the truck does, how many calls does the truck go out on, and things like that. And we do an estimate to give you an ROI on your system that you would get it back. Normally, I can remember this number because I'm used to seeing it on the screen in front of me. We estimate 33 gallons of fuel equals a certain amount of emissions.
Right.
So if you're just sitting idling, and so many hours of idling equals, an hour of idling equals 33 miles driven. So you're doing a lot of damage on the vehicle just sitting there in that. So it prolongs the life of the vehicle. Ambulances, a lot of times, maybe have 5 to 7 years. You can stretch that out to 10 with an idle mitigation system, because the other word I wanted to use was hybridization, because it turns the vehicle into a hybrid.
Sure.
We know there's a lot of manufacturers that have the new electric trucks, which are going to be coming. But right now is the time of a lot of idle mitigation time for that in the industry.
Yeah, and I think we're sort of getting there when you talk about incorporating the idle mitigation system on your spec. Can you give us maybe some tips or some things to look for when you're getting ready to buy that new truck?
Yeah. So how many calls does your vehicle go out on a day? If you got us, if you're from Pennsylvania, Jason, you guys are very familiar with a lot of the volunteer stations where there might be a truck sitting in the station for a month and never move.
Yes.
A $40,000, $50,000 item on a truck like that's probably a waste of money.
Right.
Right. But a vehicle that goes out on calls every hour, every couple hours or whatever, or they're in big cities or something like that, that set at a lot of scenes for multiple hours of time and putting out those emissions, especially in the larger cities where they're really cracking down on the emissions, the idle mitigation, that kind of comes into a big factor as to the use case and or how much do you idle. And a lot of vehicles, mostly ambulances, have hour meters built into the chassis, like a Ford chassis or GM. You can push a couple buttons to see how many hours that vehicle's actually idled during its lifetime so far. So that gives you a little bit of more ammo on figuring out what system works best for what you want to put on.
Danny, I know every state has different regulations. Do you know, is there any state that has said you have to have like this type of system on your vehicle, or is it still kind of optional across the country?
To my knowledge, not that you have to have it, but we have a few customers that have implemented, said, well, they get this on every single truck. Like Toronto Fire in Canada, for instance. They are installing these on all their new fire trucks.
So you touched on a great thing right there. New fire trucks. We all know the lead time of new fire trucks is out there. We all know that a new fire truck, we had an episode already where we talked about the price of fire trucks constantly climbing and climbing. Can you retrofit this system onto an existing truck?
The system, when Zero RPM started the company 12, 15 years ago, they started out in the work truck space. They got into some ambulances. We do a lot of ambulances because those vehicles are F series trucks. They're GMs. They're stuff like that. Those are stuff that, they change very little during the course of the year each year. So we find out what the new thing is and we upgrade into that system. Well, fire truck is way more involved where, you got red trucks going down the road. They all have pumps on them. They all have this and that. But the engineering group that engineered that fire truck, they all have different electronics and technology in there. So our engineering group has to work with those guys to be able to make sure our system talks to everything in that truck because we're so integrated into it. So a new truck being installed, it's a little easier because they're putting these pieces on as they build it, just like anything else. A retrofit, first we have to make sure it's not an old truck that's like probably analog or something like that rather than the new. And then the other is we have to make sure that we have worked with the engineering groups from that manufacturer to know we talk with the system. You can put lithium batteries in basically about anything to get and make a supplemental power, right? You can have supplemental power, but if you want idle mitigation, it is very involved in the inner workings of a truck.
As far as the mitigation systems go, for the end user, are there any sort of maintenance things they should know about or like yearly cleaning or anything like that to keep it running nice?
Well, that's one of the really cool things about the idle mitigation system. It doesn't require any maintenance at all. The biggest thing is periodically it does need to be plugged in and let it charge fully up. Because if you've got a truck that's on the run all the time, it's being charged by shoreline, and then when it's on the road, it's being charged by the alternator. Now, if it's full all the time and they haven't used it, you're fine. But whenever they run the system down to where it needs to be charged back up, they would need to plug it in and let it set overnight to get a full charge to keep the life and all the good parts of the battery.
Yeah, let's shift to Kussmaul's solar power charging technology. I want you to give us maybe an overview of that technology and then maybe some unique features to that as well.
Well, before you even talk about it, I'm going to just give it a quick plug. So most of our listeners have probably seen some of our stuff on social media where we started with our new demo truck. We haven't nicknamed it yet. We're waiting until it's out in the road for a little while till we come up with a nickname for it. Right now it's just Jason's truck. But demo vehicle for us is going to spend its life on the road. Not typically in a garage, not typically somewhere where it can be plugged in. So our first concern was, am I going to leave this thing in a parking lot somewhere, go home for a week, come back and not be able to start this thing? That was when we learned, hey, there's solar technology out there that can keep these batteries charged and keep them running. And we reached out to Kussmaul to work with us on what to put on this vehicle. I'm going to go into the details of what it is and how it works. I'm going to tell you right now, it's awesome. Like, we've had zero issues with it so far. We've had no problems when we get in that vehicle. It starts every time. And Danny, you can tell us why and how that works.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So first, we utilize our sister company Xantrex, their line of solar panels, because Kussmaul doesn't have one of their own. We utilize their line, and we use their systems for fire trucks and ambulances. We do a lot of agricultural equipment and things like that. The first thing to remember about solar charging is solar is a maintainer. It's not an actual charging, doesn't do the main part of charging. If your battery's dead, the solar panel is only putting out 5 amps, depending on the size you pull on, right? It's only putting that, so it's a trickle charge. It's not a charger like you would expect if you plug a shoreline in and get 40 amps of charge from a Kussmaul charger. So it's a supplemental thing. So what it does is it tops the batteries off while you're sitting, while you're waiting, and things like that. While it's sitting in the parking lot at the airport or something like that, it doesn't run the batteries down, because sometimes there's just little parasitic loads that you're not aware of that are on the truck. It's a very small draw, but in a week or 2 weeks, it draws the batteries down to and low enough that the truck won't start. So we have different sizes and different powers and things like that, different wattages that you can utilize for what your need is. We start with 115 watt. We have a 220 watt and a 345 watt. Glass panels, our sister company Xantrex, they have glass panels as well. We don't have that lineup in our system we've looked at. And basically because you put a glass panel on top of a fire truck or an ambulance and they're flying through neighborhoods, hitting tree limbs and things like that. If someone wanted them, we could supply them, but we stick to the flex panel. It's a 1/4 inch thick. It's got sticky backing on it, sticks on the top of the roof. You have a solar controller inside so you can see the amperage flow and things like that. And you can set settings. There is a remote control panel to see, so you don't have to put everything out where you can see it. Everybody knows how touchy firefighters and people like to be in the fire stations and push buttons. So we can put them in compartments and things like that. So, nothing gets changed by accident.
You touched on something there that I think a lot of people don't understand properly. And you mentioned a term that's common to us in the fire apparatus industry, and that's parasitic loads. So a lot of people see that big battery disconnect switch and they think, hey, when I switch that off, everything's off. My batteries are sitting idle and nothing's touching them. That's not true today. There are several parasitic loads. And if people don't understand that, things like your engine has a computer in it. That computer needs to stay powered up all the time. So that is a parasitic load that's drawing on your batteries. Most people have all kinds of radios and things like that. They don't necessarily want to just be disconnected. So a lot of those things are parasitic loads. I don't know if there's anything else I'm missing, Danny, that you think of that's
anything that you have on the truck anything you have that's on the truck that's 12 volt, if you shut all those batteries off, they're not getting any power unless you have them connected directly to the battery. So if you got handhelds and things in here that are 12 volt and they need to be charged, those go directly to the batteries. Those are bypassed around that switch. When you shut that switch off, that just means your scene lights and your outside lights and all that kind of stuff won't work. But all your stuff inside is still drawing off the batteries.
Yeah, we're talking.
We add the parasitic load to the batteries that you have. One rule of thumb at Kussmaul is 5 amps per battery if you're trying to pick out a new charger for what you're going to put on the truck. So most trucks have 6 batteries on them. That's 30 amps. Then you can take and turn all of your lights on. You can turn all your handhelds on, make sure everything is on, like just as if the truck was in service. And then you put a battery clamp meter around the positive cable of the battery, and it'll show you the current flow that's coming out of that battery. And that's your parasitic load. Whenever you find that out, you add that amount to what the amperage was for the batteries, and that'll give you the size of charger you need for the truck. We go all the way up to an 80 amp charger right now. Everyone is familiar today with our new Chief Series charger. We upped it to a 60 amp, a 40 amp and a 60 amp, took the place of some of our older legacy chargers, which were the 1200s and the LPC 40s. That was a big decision. One of the reasons we did that is because we wanted to get updated with technology. It was getting harder and harder to buy parts to build the older style charger.
Right.
So we had to make a sacrifice. Because as much as everybody loved the older charger, it was getting harder and harder to make them. So the new charger is doing really well. It has a lot of connectivity. It has a 5-year warranty versus a 3-year warranty on our old ones. The 60 amp, the reason we went to a 60 amp is because we all know nobody takes anything off of the fire tank. Right? Everybody's always adding stuff to it. And along with new NFPA stuff that's coming along, we're working on trying to stay ahead of that curve as well.
Well, and you touched on two quick things that I want to highlight. One is basically you shouldn't just guess at what size charger you need. You should look at what you're actually drawing and make that decision. And we talk about this all the time. We did a podcast on speccing vehicles and how a lot of people start from the last vehicle they spec. And they say, we're going to start from there. Well, that's great. If you spec'd a vehicle 20 years ago and you had a certain size charger on it, a lot of stuff's changed on that new truck. So you're probably going to need a bigger charger. And you don't have to just guess. Call an expert, call someone like Danny, call any of the regionals from Kussmaul, and they'll walk you through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we hit on some great points here today, Danny and Jason. And at the end, usually I open up the floor for any final comments or things that you want to put out there. And then I also want to give you some time to just highlight your company in general, maybe any initiatives you guys got going on or any special events you have.
Yeah. So of course we're gearing up and getting ready for FDIC.
Yep.
It's going to be a big one for us this year. We're really excited about it. One of the new things we have in development is let everybody know to help along with the NFPA and with some customer requests. The Chief Charger will go on a step further. We're going to be coming out. It's probably going to be a year away and nothing right away, but because we're going to make sure it's right. But coming out with a 120 amp charger, a new Chief Series charger that's 120 amps. It'll still be 3 banks. It'll still do dual chemistries, just like the current Chief Charger and everything. It'll have all the same technology. It's just going to be a higher amperage to be able to work with all those regulations and things that are coming out. We're also working on auto eject improvements all the time. That's one of our oldest staples. We're the inventor of the auto eject. So we'll continue working on those improvements and things like that. We have a factory in Long Island, New York. The regional guys are out. Yeah. If anybody has questions, please reach out to the regional guy that's in your area or get a hold of me, and I'd be happy to assist you guys. Anyway.
You touched on something important there that we want to highlight because we're located in the same place with one of our companies, made in America, Long Island, New York, not far from where FRC's headquarters are. Awesome and proud to have you as a partner out there.
I really appreciate you guys inviting me on today. This is
Yeah, of course. We appreciate it. And this wraps up another episode of Rig Recon Live. We talked with Danny Graham of Kussmaul today, and we talked about solar power charging systems, idle mitigation systems, and a lot more. Again, if you're interested in these products, you can contact Graham and he'll be happy to help you out. If you haven't already, follow us on social media at Rig Recon, and you can find this podcast wherever you get it. As Jason and I mentioned throughout the show, we've done about 6 or 7 episodes already on various different topics, so catch up on any that you haven't listened to already. And most importantly, visit our website, rigrecon.com. Until then, spec the best.